And next up, we will welcome Carrie Northcott, Head of Digital Sciences from Pfizer. Oh, there we go. Who will be presenting on participation with the power of the patient voice. And one thing I have to say I've always really appreciated about Carrie, who I've seen present at a number of conferences, is she does share real, actionable lessons learned, which I think we all could do a better job of doing. So really excited to hear your presentation, Carrie.
Thank you. So is this working? Good. I think that's the reason I get to come and give all these talks, because I get to give all these great examples, and that's pretty much why I'm here. So thank you very much. Let me get through the proper stuff. Let's see, full disclosure, not any opinions of Pfizer. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about considerations for conducting a decentralized clinical trial. So full disclosure, I wasn't involved in this trial. I was busy developing nocturnal scratch and sleep during the time that this occurred. But with that said, I really wanted to talk about this because there's a lot of lessons learned that I have. I actually work with people that are on this study that are experts in voice. Believe it or not, I'm not actually going to go through voice aspects of this, but I want to talk you through some of my learnings that I've had, some of the lessons that we had. And I actually thought about this last night as I was going through the talk and practicing. Should have called this the devil's in the details instead of lessons in voice, because there's always lessons to be learned. I'm going to go through the ACRIS decentralized study trial and just kind of come up with some summary and conclusions from things that I've learned throughout this study and working with the people that did this at that time. So I've been putting these up front, and I like this. Lauren, you made a great comment earlier. You have to spend a lot of time convincing people, et cetera, and I say it takes a village. It actually takes a small country, I think, now to do any of these types of studies. I wanted to put this up front. There were a lot of people involved in these studies. While I said I wasn't involved, I probably was in some form or another. There was a lot of individuals, and also you'll see these on the far side. These were people we had actually convinced that this was a doable project. We were going to Pfizer asking for a significant amount of money in a very tumultuous time during COVID to do a proof of concept and development study for an algorithm to measure detection of COVID. And that took a lot of talking, a lot of convincing, and a lot of people to go forward. So I always like to start that and say thank you to all the participants, because without them, there wouldn't be any research. So this is a couple of slides that I often use. So most clinical studies look like this, and I wish I could say this figure was a lot different now than when I first created it, but it's not. We asked participants to go into the clinic. These appointments can be tough to get. You have to manage your kids' schedules, your family schedules, et cetera. These clinic visits can be affected by your recall bias. I always joke, I had a dad that had Parkinson's. He'd sit and practice his assessments before he would go in. So he would like show off and how great he did, and then he'd walk outside the clinic visit and he would pass out because he really practiced really hard. So there can be bias that occurs in these visits. Compliance coming back, so this is where ACRIS come into the play, especially in vaccine research. Getting people to come back when they feel better, that can be a challenge. You just don't get that full picture. You don't understand what's going on in that home environment. Asking someone to walk for 6 minutes in a clinic is not the same as asking about their physical activity and their day-to-day activities. You can miss populations. Something that struck me on vacation as I was driving out in the West is how many populations we missed, especially during the COVID era. I was listening to stories of people telling me about the number of people who were in the hospitals and all that was going on and how many people we missed in these clinical trials just because we weren't able to reach them. And some of these technologies allow us to reach those populations we weren't able to. Again, snapshots in time, time-consuming, expensive, et cetera, et cetera. So we have the ability now to make these more patient-centric. And I loved your comment earlier. We have this ability. Why aren't we doing it? Hopefully we show you that you can be done. But again, the devil's in the details. We need to start thinking about the patients. We need to think about the clinical trials. We need to think about the sensitivity measures. We need to be more cost-effective. If we look at our clinical trials, we need to do something different. Just beating the same thing over and over just isn't working. So let's think outside that box. So hopefully today I can give you an example of one that worked for us. ACRIS. This is a study we did, decentralized. We looked at over 10,000 participants in this study. So how did we even get here? Just so you don't think that we just came up with this and said, hey, COVID, we need to come up with this algorithm. This is actually a process. In 2017, pre even the thought of COVID, we started actually realizing there was a loss to follow-up in vaccine trials. So how do we is there a way that we can actually detect early onset of respiratory illness, and how do we actually do this? So we did some pilot studies and found some promising voice features. Then came along COVID. And so we developed this study called ACRIS, or launched ACRIS. Acute respiratory infection study was a proof of concept to use voice as a digital biomarker for vaccines, and it was a fully decentralized trial. The goal was to have a sensitivity of the algorithm greater than 70%, specificity greater than 60%. So ultimately, our primary objective was to build a voice and symptom algorithm for the detection and monitoring COVID, and link these symptoms and voice features in positive patients. Again, secondary objectives, because it's decentralized, big trial, assess the app compliance, quality of the recordings, infection rates, and feasibility of the self-swabbing. So now we're in a situation where we're giving these packages to patients. How well does it work? Can we actually get the algorithm course? And then how does it actually work? The whole goal of this is a study to demonstrate that we can detect early onset of respiratory illness and apply all these different methodologies to quantify these changes in symptoms. So to do this, the study was actually set up as such. We did all our recruitment via social media, websites, et cetera, fully decentralized, no coming in. There was a custom app then in the app stores that they could download. It was BYOD, of course. So we had iOS as well as Android phones, which I'll come back to that. I found that to be really interesting. Devil's in the details, remember? They were screened, enrollment application, sent in, reviewed. We ended up with 9,151 participants enrolled. Those that didn't were said thank you to. They were given an enrollment survey. They had to swab twice, so they were sent swabs at home to confirm that they had COVID. It changed. They were asked to record their symptoms and voice daily for 6 to 8 weeks. They'd swab again, and then they completed the study. So let's just start at the simple stuff, recruitment. Not as easy as it sounds. So we went with a social media-based recruitment strategy. We had to have a highly visible website, and we linked the clinicaltrials.gov. We tried to go out in all forums. Again, this was COVID, so we had to think outside the box, ways that we could reach out to others. The study landing page then provided key requirements and how to download the app. We had to use e-consent on mobile app, fully remote, decentralized, no PIs were involved. They had an introduction from video from a PI, remote automated identity verification. I'll smile, that's to this day a challenge. I had someone discuss the other day, can we do that, and how to go about doing it. It's not a simple thing. We'd have simple inclusion-exclusion requirements. So I don't know about any of you, when you work with clinical staff, those inclusion-exclusion can get complicated really, really quickly, and you continually had to bring them back and think about simple inclusion-exclusion, and they had to be reviewed and approved by the IRB. Again, we had 9,151 enrolled, with 43% completing the self-swab 1, 31% completing the self-swab 2, and 28% completing both. So what did this look like? It was a BYOD app. They downloaded that system onto their personal phone. Again, went through all the different components. We had to capture the daily symptoms. I'll go through that in more detail. They were sent test kits to test for COVID and self-swabs, and then we had to capture the voice data again, which would then utilize the voice machine learning, looking for changes in voice and using the acoustic pipeline that we developed. And I'll go through more detail in a second how this went down. All right, devil's in the details, right? So if you're at home, the app's got to replace that clinical research setting. So we had to take into background noise. Who's got kids? Dogs, cats, kids screaming in the middle of it. We're looking to record voice recordings. There's tons of background noise. You can control that in a clinical environment. You can control the microphone, the quality of the microphone. You can control the distance from what you're using that microphone, none of which you can do when it's an at-home app. Clear task instructions. So for you and I, just telling someone to do a task, pretty straightforward, right? Write it. Please say for 2 seconds or 4 seconds or whatever. Really, really simple. yeah, of course I did that. And you get it, and you're like, no, that wasn't it. So you have to think about different ways. Some people are readers, some people are listeners, someone wants a demonstration. You have to have kind ways to say, oh, wasn't quite right, too much background noise, wasn't the other. These are all things you have to think about. They need to be able to speak up. You can't have the microphone out here because then you can't hear it. So you have to make sure you get the appropriate capture. You also have to have a sufficient length of time, as I said, a certain length of time for phenoms in reading. Screen sizes are important. When you ask them to read a passage, the rainbow passage, if you have a small screen, as many more elderly tend to have the smaller, older flip phones, they've got to scroll, and they won't scroll because they just saw the first few lines. So you had to make sure you had at least 10 seconds of recording of that. And again, screen size to screen size can all make a difference, all of which are the devil's in the details. So these are all things we had to think about as we developed those apps and tested and what was quality data or not. They had to potentially change their phone during the study. What happened if I went and got a new phone? There's always a new thing. What happens if I change mid or have an update to my phone that I can't control as a study site? Again, I went through the screens. There's different process settings. There's a reason, I love this explained to me one time, this has nothing to do with this study. There's a reason we're all of a sudden phenomenal photographers with our Apple phones now. There's certain filters and gains and things. We're not all that good, I'll be completely honest, but there's things that are automatically put onto the background, which if you're implementing these types of things, you have to think about because you don't want automatic adjustments. You won't want all that. You've got to make sure you buffer noises and different gains, and each phone has different components you have to take into account. I think that covers that part. So those are some of the things we had to think about as we go into the app design. Again, devil's in the details. We also had to collect respiratory illness symptoms. We had to figure out how to explain what their activities were, collect their various symptoms, how best to display that. Again, I love the comment earlier about the green color. I smiled when you said that and how you had to test the different colors and how is it a sliding scale, is it a scroll scale, 0 to 10. I always joke that on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 I'd be dead, 0 I wouldn't be here. So now I've got to figure out what all those other numbers mean. How do I explain that to somebody, what that all means to someone? And then giving examples of what those all mean so you can be able to have that consistency across all. Those are things that we have to think about as we develop those apps. When it comes to voice, remember I said earlier, just giving simple recordings isn't easy. So we provided examples, listening to a demo of the person actually saying it so you understood what to actually say. So hold the E sound for 4 seconds. And then provided the example, take a deep breath and say it for 2 seconds. And they also maintain the volume. So you had feedback as you were giving it. Am I far close enough? Am I too close? Am I farther away? Those are important things to understand. And I love having this microphone. It's a great example of how to do it. And then giving them the proper feedback. Yay, successful, you did great. That's something that's really important for people as they go forward. So even allowing you to confirm that the recording doesn't have any information that you didn't intend. Remember, you gotta remember those people in the background. You don't want identifiable information either. So you wanna make sure that they be able to heard that and provide any context, and they can actually erase and redo it as well. As I stated earlier, in the clinic, you have that quiet environment. You have a quality microphone. You can control the distance, comfortable voice, task guidance. These are things you had to think about with the Acris app. We had to have a background check with feedback. Can you move to a quieter place? It's a little loud where you're at. Put the phone or the microphone closer to you, farther away. Having an interactive app that just wasn't reading and giving you instructions, understand that signal to noise ratio, and giving those animations, demo sounds, instructions were very key. What this resulted in was controlling those background noise levels. We were able to check the speech levels and provided that contextual insights of the speech and identified external microphone settings as we went forward. So great, we got data. It's awesome, but now we got to process data. I always joke, I've broken Pfizer more times than I care to count since I've started, and that's a kind of a new goal of mine, how many times I can break Pfizer, bringing in large data files. But something I hear from my data scientists is how do we prepare for analysis? We had large amounts of data. We had to implement automated checks. prior to the data analysis to be able to clean the data. If you talk to any data scientists, cleaning the data is their worst nightmare. They get these huge files, what works, what doesn't, what's good, what's bad, and they do those automated situations. So those are key things that we had to develop. Understand, did they actually read the passage? Did they say the phenomes? Was there one voice per participant ID or not? And be able to throw out that data and sort that quickly. So those populations had to be determined. And sorry, y'all gotta know, I gotta have at least one slide with some data on it. It's just me, I'm a scientist. And this is something that was fascinating to me. I do this, and when I say learnings, this is a big one to me. I walk into more studies now, like bring your own device. I mean, we all have phones. I almost was gonna ask at the beginning, but we all have phones. In fact, I have two. Bring your own device, it's great, it's easy, everyone has one, but there's differences. And this actually data showed that there was a difference statistically between Android and iOS platforms in the healthy subpopulation, that there were statistical differences in the voice and how it was recorded. So it does matter. The devil is in the details. All right. So lessons that we've had: study design, optimize your user engagement, test the app, and give feedback on study design prior to deployment. You'd be surprised how often we don't do this. Yep, we got this, no big deal. Recruitment, use all different types of recruitment strategies. Remote consent, make sure you don't pay attention to that and utilize that appropriately. Operations, procure phones for participants if need be. Not all participants may have bank accounts to pay them later, so those are things you didn't think about, but they do. In this case, self-swabs at different time points, shipping and handling those can be challenging. Keep in mind data heterogeneity, ongoing monitoring of compliance. That's been a huge one that I've carried on from many of my studies moving forward, is how to monitor compliance. This is a big learning from this study. And ultimately, the conclusions. It was a successful study. We recruited over 9,151 participants. I didn't show you the voice data. By the way, the manuscript was just accepted, the Journal of Voice. Next couple of weeks, hopefully the article will be coming out that goes into all the details. But we were able to support our hypothesis that acoustic features of voice can discriminate between healthy individuals and those with COVID, RSV, and flu. And it's really, and it was consistent with the real world data. So throughout this study, I want to consider it a success. We've learned quite a bit, and we've had a lot of lessons learned. And I hope this was helpful to others. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Carrie. Very helpful. And we are about at time, but we have one quick question for you from Dusty, or Joe Dustin. He's curious about the custom ePro app that you used for this DCT study. Was it completely custom built, or did you work with an ePro vendor to
We worked with
support it?
a vendor, and they assisted in the development of the app. There was a lot of feedback back and forth and a lot of different versions created.
Great. Well, thank you, Carrie.
Thank you all.